Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, and Shabbat Shalom. Today is Shabbat. We're going to look at 1 Kings chapter 11. There are 43 verses. In verse 1, there's an omission of Solomon. King Solomon was a lover of women. So this describes who Solomon was. And it also says he took strange women versus he loved many strange women. Describes the Zidonian versus the Amorite. Okay, Zidonian is in the Masoretic, so it is Amorite versus Zidonian. Okay. Verse 2, it says here, forbade versus said. Forbade versus said, which means the emphasis is on that it was forbidden for Israel to take of those nations, versus there is no emphasis on it being forbidden in the Masoretic, merely that it was said. Okay, Adonai said. Didn't just forbid, he just said it. No, it's stronger than that. And then regarding their idols, so physical idols versus Elohim, not so much represented as idols of worship. Verse 3, there is an omission of after their Elohim. Verse 4, his heart was not perfect versus turned away his heart after other Elohim. So when King Solomon was old, we have one event, and it is the following: his heart was not perfect with Adonai, his Elohim. In the Masoretic, we see two events. It says his wives turned away his heart after other Elohim, and then number 2, his heart was not perfect with Adonai. And the previous event, in verse 3, it says they turned away his heart. This occurred earlier as opposed to when he became old. So, let's see, when he became old. Okay, in the Masoretic, it's saying that his wives turned away his heart, and this is again after he turned old. But no, in the Septuagint, it already happened in the previous verse. The strange women turned away his heart after their Elohim. So that's very specific, and it is according to the order of things. In the Masoretic, we have no sense of that order. It's kind of all over the place. They turned away his heart, and then he became old, and they turned away his heart again. So no, it's not that way. Verse 4, I believe, is parenthetical as well. So you can read that verse 4 just being a parenthetical statement. So let's read it. Just scan over it anyway. He had 700 wives, etc. The strange women turned away his heart after their Elohim. And then he became old, parenthetical. And to Astar, okay, I'm not going to say the name. I almost said the name. I'm not supposed to say the names of other Elohim. That's actually a Torah commandment. So he had 700 wives, princesses, 300 concubines, and the strange women turned away his heart after their Elohim. And then there's a list of the names in verse 5. So that's why I say verse 4 is really parenthetical. You can see it starts with an A. The abomination of the Zidonians. And then we have a mention of another false Elohim. It is added in the Masoretic. We'll discuss that more later on. In verse 6, went not after Adonai versus went not fully after. So he did not go after him at all, it seems, in the Septuagint. That's my understanding of that. But that that might just be stretching it a little because, yes, he did obey Adonai, but there seems to be an inflection point in terms of these women turning his heart away. Verse is not 100%, so he went after him, but not fully, which makes a little more sense to me, but just reading the narrative. Verse 7, idol. We're going to see this continuous difference, the idol of Moab versus the abomination of Moab. You're going to see this distinction between idol and then either Elohim or abomination. And then it says their king, the idol. And this is another continuous difference. It calls their Elohim their king, whereas in the Masoretic, it actually makes more sense that it is a proper name. It's not their king. It actually is this name, Molech. Verse 8, continuous difference. Again, idols versus Elohim. Verse 10, by no means to go after their Elohim or go after other Elohim. Versus that he should not go after. So you shouldn't. No, by no means. It's emphatic. You should not. There is a significant difference. The first one in this chapter, there's an omission of but take heed to do what Adonai Elohim commanded him. So it's not just a negative in terms of do not do this. There's a positive command to King Solomon saying you need to obey. Listen and obey to what Adonai Elohim is commanding you. And then it says here in the last part of the verse, neither was his heart perfect with Adonai. So I think it gives us more information that yes, he did not, in verse 6, it builds on that. It says, he went not after Adonai, not altogether, but compared to, like David his father did. And then we have more information provided to us, just how what that looks like or what it sounds like in verse 10. Neither was his heart perfect with Adonai according to the heart of David his father. So that's more specific, how he did not follow Adonai because his heart was not perfect. In the Masoretic, it says he kept not that which Adonai commanded. So that's more superficial. The Septuagint goes more into the heart of the matter. It goes into the spiritual aspect, the under the surface, beneath the skin. Verse 11, thy kingdom, I will surely rend thy kingdom out of thy hand, versus the kingdom. No, it's his kingdom. It's King Solomon's kingdom that was given to him by Adonai. Verse 14, there's an omission of and Hezron, son of Eliade, who dwelt in Ramah, and then Adad-ezer, king of Zobah, his master. But it's not a complete omission because in the Masoretic, we will see later on, and I'll just go there right now. Verse 24, it says, and he gathered men to him and became captain over a band when David slew them of Zobah. They went to Damascus and dwelt therein and reigned in Damascus. So it's not a complete omission. It's partly omitted, as we will see later on. Okay, verse 15 to 22 is a flashback that's important to note in the narrative regarding this individual by the name of Hadad, or Adair in the Greek. Okay, verse 17, all the Edomites versus certain Edomites. So it says all the Edomites ran away, Hadad and all the Edomites, versus certain of them. It's only some of them ran away in the Masoretic. Okay, next is verse 18, men versus they. So this is specific to males that came out or rose up out of the city. Verse 19, we have an omission of elder. So Hadad was given, I should say, Pharaoh gave Hadad his wife, sister, and we have the name of the wife. It is Thekemina in the Septuagint, but Tapenes in the Masoretic. So which is it? Tapenes, Egyptian derivation says wife of the king. So it seems to be a title. Like Pharaoh is a title, Tapenes is a title. Think of it like First Lady, the First Lady of ancient Egypt. That's essentially what it is. Okay. Okay, verse 20. And notice as well, elder sister was given to Hadad, which is interesting because usually in the Middle Eastern culture, the elders married off first before the younger. But we have the reverse happening here. Notice that the elder is being given to Hadad when the younger sister obviously was married to Pharaoh before the elder. And this is an important detail because it's not just any sister of Tapenes, it is her elder sister. So that is important as well. Verse 20, brought him up in the midst of the sons of Pharaoh. So their son, the son of Hadad and Thekemina, is named Ganabath, and he was brought up in the middle of the sons of Pharaoh, versus he was just weaned in Pharaoh's house. So we don't get the sense of him being raised as a young child and perhaps a young man, mingling with the sons of Pharaoh. So he would be recognized as a royal child, and he would be familiar with their cultural practices. That is Ganabath. Verse 22. By all means, let me go. So this is Hadad speaking to Pharaoh. By all means, let me go. I'm going one way or another. Versus nothing. So he's answering Pharaoh in the Masoretic, saying, answering the question, I lack nothing, but anyway, just let me go anyways, please. Like, just let me go anyway. It's not as emphatic. He's not as driven to go. So that's verse 22. Verses 23 to 24 is found in verse 14 of the Septuagint. And here are the differences. I'm just going to outline it for you. Hadad-ezer was an adversary in the Septuagint. Okay, Hadad-ezer. But he was not in the Masoretic. He was identified as he whom Rezon fled with. So notice this second individual, the second enemy, mentioned after Hadad, Rezon, the son of Eliada, which fled, Rezon fled from his master, Hadad-ezer, king of Zobah. Let's look at verse 14, just to fact check, to show you exactly what I'm talking about. Hezron, son of Eliade, who dwelt in Ramah. So that's a second enemy, okay? We have Hadad, first enemy, second enemy, Hezron. And then the third enemy, Hadad-ezer, king of Zobah, his master. So it seems to be that Hadad-ezer is the third enemy. That's my understanding of this reading. Okay, verse 25. Hadad is the bitter enemy. So he's identified as the bitter enemy of Israel versus he was an adversary to Israel. Who? This is not talking about Hadad. This is referring to the individual mentioned in verse 23, Rezon. Because it's continuing on with that previous sentence in verse 24, which is an interesting difference if we're trying to identify exactly who did what. reigned in the land of Edom. This is Hadad. So he reigned in the land of Edom versus Syria. So is Syria Edom? I believe Edom is identified as Jordan, if I'm not mistaken. So Edom has more relationship or more of a history with the modern country of Jordan or Jordan. Verse 26, a big difference here, or first one of this chapter, it says that Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, he was the servant. He was a servant of Solomon. That's where he started off. He did not start off as a traitor, as in the Masoretic. It says Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and they name his mother. He lifted up his hand against the king. So there's no backstory there. There's nothing to indicate that he had a relationship with Solomon, with King Solomon. He simply betrayed him from the get-go. That is not what we're given in the Septuagint. We're given more information. Important information, very relevant information. So he did not start off as a traitor. He began as a servant of Solomon. Verse 27, and then we have a progression of what exactly occurred. Verse 27, this was the occasion of his lifting up his hands against King Solomon. So yes, he did betray King Solomon, but it was progressive. It happened in sequence. There was an occasion. A circumstance occurred. In the Masoretic, it says this was the cause or the reason that he lifted up his hand. Okay, dabar, let's look that up. Cause, this was the speaking. Okay, that doesn't make as much sense, but anyway, this was the speaking, the saying. Okay, and then verse 28, and we're given the reason why. Because King Solomon built such and such, the citadel and the fortification. Verse 28, and it describes Jeroboam as a person who was was active. In the Masoretic, it gives us more information when you do the research. Industrious is the word used, but when you look at the Hebrew, asa, and then asa malaka, it means doing. So he was doing ministry or employment. So he was a busy person. Active has a lot of connotations to it, especially in modern times. It can mean fit, active in fitness, physical exercise, but in the context of the story and context of this historical period, he was active in terms of doing either ministry or employment, or an industrious person. Yeah, industrious is a good word. So I'm going to give that one to the Masoretic. It makes more sense. At least the translator picked a better word. Okay, verse 29, there's an omission of, and caused him to turn aside out of the way. So who's this referring to? It's the prophet Ahijah, the Shilonite, found Jeroboam. And not only did he find him in the way, the path, or wherever they were traveling, he caused him, so the prophet caused Jeroboam to turn aside out of the way. So he took him aside, and Ahijah was clad with a new garment, versus he had clad himself with a new garment. So it's not clear who's wearing the new garment in the Masoretic. Could be the prophet Ahijah, could be Jeroboam. But in the Septuagint, it is clear that it is Ahijah. It says Ahijah was clad with a new garment. And then what did he do? It explains that he took hold of his new garment, Ahijah did, and ripped it up into 12 pieces, ripped it, tore it. Then verse 32, we have another big difference. It may not seem like one, but it will make more sense when you do your research. It says here, he shall have King Solomon, will have 2 tribes. The Greek word is duo, which we know what that means two, a duo, versus 1 tribe, echad. That's the Hebrew word being used. So we have the Greek duo versus echad, 2 very different words. So that is a big difference between the 2 texts. Will he have 2 tribes or 1 tribe? Well, just by the common sense of subtraction, it says you will give him 10 tribes in both translations. So how many are left? 12 minus 10 is 2. So just simple math. Just by doing simple math, we can see the Septuagint is correct. But this is a big contradiction in the Masoretic text. So people can use this as fuel to say, look at this. The Bible doesn't even get math right. And frankly, doesn't. The Masoretic, anyway. Septuagint does, thankfully. Simple math is done, and we can see which one is correct. And then it talks about 33, in verse 33, he forsook me, Adonai speaking, about referring to King Solomon, versus they have forsaken me. So this seems to talk about all Israel collectively. No, it's not talking about all of Israel. This is only referring to King Solomon. Continuous difference of their king versus that name there, Milcom. Actually, it was referred to as Molech, wasn't it? So it's interesting. He has 2 names apparently. He walked not in my ways, King Solomon, versus and have not walked in my ways. So it's continuing on with this referencing all the children of Israel. The tribes of Israel, perhaps. Which doesn't make sense because it's not all of Israel. It's only the 10. If we're going to go by that narrative, but that's not what it's referring to. Okay, he walked not in my ways versus and have not walked. So again, he, talking about Solomon, is specifically culpable. He is the one who was called out by name versus they. Verse 34, significant difference. It says, for, which could possibly be read as but I will certainly resist him all the days of his life. So I will certainly oppose him. So Adonai is speaking, but I will certainly oppose him all the days of whose life? King Solomon. King Solomon's life, he will be opposed by Adonai. Versus, I will make him prince all the days of his life. So, okay, you know what? Let's make that a big difference. That could be, I'm going to put that as a big difference. So on one hand, Adonai will resist him, King Solomon, versus I'm going to make him a prince. I'm going to bless him. 2 wildly different things altogether. What does prince mean in the Hebrew? Could mean a chief, lifted up, a captain. Could also mean a rising mist or a vapor, which is very strange, I have to admit. And that's verse 34. Okay, verse 36, continuous difference of 2 tribes versus 1 tribe. Okay, again, the word is duo in Greek. And then we see here, my servant David may have an establishment continually. That is referring to King Solomon. I should say King Solomon's son, so King David's grandson. Versus light. My servant may have a light or a lamp in the Hebrew. Verse 39, another significant to possibly a big difference. Verse 39, there's an addition of, and I will for this afflict the seed of David, but not forever. So this is a curse, which I believe kind of harkens back to what was said in terms of I will oppose him. In verse 34, I will certainly resist him all the days of his life. So that could be This might have been moved in the Masoretic. I'm going to resist him. But why would you translate, just speaking out loud here, why would they translate that, the Masoretic writers, resist versus afflict? So oppose means you're going against, right? Versus to afflict, to like torture, to cause pain to the seed of David, which includes the Messiah. Going to afflict him. Yes, he was afflicted, but not forever. So it's interesting. Verse 41, closing out, getting to the end of this chapter, it talks about the rest of the history of Solomon versus the acts of Solomon. Are not these things written in the book of the life of Solomon versus the book of the acts of Solomon? So what book is this? What is there a book called the book of the acts of Solomon or the book of the life of Solomon? Well, when we look at the word for book, it can also mean the plural, could mean books of Solomon, which by implication could include all the books written by King Solomon or purported to be written by King Solomon, which would include the apocryphal book of the Wisdom of Solomon, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiasticus, etc. So again, it could mean multiple books. Verse 43, there's an omission of, and it came to pass, I'm going to highlight that here, when Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard of it, this is the death of Solomon, even while he was yet in Mizraim, Egypt, as he fled from the face of Solomon and dwelt in Mizraim. So basically Jeroboam learns of the death of Solomon, and what did he do? He straightway comes into his own city. So all this is omitted, everything I'm reading here in this verse. He comes into his own city, into the land of Sarirah. Where is this? In the mount of Ephraim. So what is Sarirah? Where is that? In the mount of Ephraim. This potentially could be Sekima or Shechem. Okay, so let me pause for a moment. So looking up Shechem, we see here, doing a word search for Ephraim, a name search. So Shechem fell to the lot of Ephraim, and we see it was a Levitical city of refuge in Ephraim. We also see it was in the territory of Ephraim. So it seems to meet all these criteria. Among the hills of Ephraim, so it is located in Ephraim. This could be Sarirah, could be Shechem, because we don't see it mentioned very much in Scripture, unless it is Sekima. So that could be a transcription error or just an alternate name. So that's all for this chapter. Thank you very much for your time. Until next time, I will bid you all. Oh, it's not doing anything there. Okay. I will bid you all Shalom Aleichem, Yivarechacha Adonai V'yishmerecha. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Irini mazisu. Pax vobiscum, peace be unto you. May the Lord bless you and keep you always. Until next time, I bid you all Maranatha.